This video was made possible thanks to the support from my patrons. Pledge today and you can be involved in what videos get made next, and also get early access to them. Link in the description. As we make our way past the halfway point of Season 3 in this retrospective, we find Doctor Who in a pretty dire situation behind the scenes. Viewing figures were down, producer John Wiles and script editor Donald Tosh had stepped down, the leading actor was becoming increasingly irritable, and what on earth was becoming of the companion role? Having been producer for just 3 full stories, it seems that John Wiles never really got to share his full vision of what Doctor Who could be, a sophisticated sci-fi show with in-depth historical themes. I mean, think about it. He inherited the epic 12-parter The Daleks' Master Plan from his predecessor, Verity Lambert, and The Massacre was a creative mess that he and Tosh delivered out of an obligation to John Lucarotti. It was only with The Mythmakers and now The Ark that we get to see what a more sophisticated Doctor Who could have looked like, as the idea of a serial set on an enormous spaceship was an idea cooked up by Wiles, and he commissioned writer Paul Erickson to put something together. Erickson had briefly worked with Donald Tosh on the soap opera Compact, and the two brainstormed how a full 4-parter could play out within this setting. While the story has a dual credit with Erickson and his wife, Leslie Scott, that's right, the first woman credited as a writer for a Doctor Who episode. But it's generally considered by everyone involved that Leslie didn't actually contribute anything to the story, and Erickson just wanted to give his wife a credit. Sorry, Leslie. While there were initial writing complications as to just who the companion of the story would be, remember at this point Katarina had been killed off, replaced by Sarah Kingdom, then Anne Chaplet, and now Dodo. Apart from that, the writing went by pretty smoothly, at least by Season 3 standards. Jackie Lane, a Mancunian actor, had also worked on Compact as well as Z Cars, Coronation Street, and other big dramas. In fact, she actually auditioned to play the first companion, Susan Foreman, back in 1963. But she did not want to commit to a lengthy contract, but it was her work at Manchester's Palace Theatre where she caught the attention of John Wiles and was cast as the Doctor's new companion. Just as John was leaving the show, and the new guard wanted to make their mark by introducing new, more modern companions, but we'll get to that later. Donald Tosh had resigned and through the end of The Massacre was gearing up his replacement, Jerry Davis, a lifelong fan of sci-fi, even running a fan club for H.G. Wells at school. He had a working relationship with Doctor Who creator Sidney Newman with CBC Television in Canada in the script department. He moved back to the UK in the 1960s and worked as a story editor for the BBC drama 199 Park Lane and the football drama United, which also featured Doctor Who writers present and future, from John Lucarotti to Malcolm Hulke, as well as director Derek Martinus. One of United's directors was also Innes Lloyd, who would turn out to be John Wiles' successor, but more on him later. The BBC came calling, and now Jerry Davis found himself working on Doctor Who, a show that had at this point become so infamous within the BBC that working on it was now considered a punishment. Enter director Michael Emerson, who was offered the gig from head of serials Gerald Savory, possibly because Gerald's wife, actress Annette Carroll, apparently had a big argument with Michael when they worked together on an adaptation of the book Buddenbrooks in 1965. Also, side note, so many of these shows that I've mentioned, 199 Park Lane, United, Buddenbrooks, none of these survive in the BBC archives. Huge shows in the 1960s made by the BBC, just gone. Half of Z Cars, a show seen by up to 14 million people, half of those episodes are lost. Compact ran for almost 400 episodes, only 4 still exist. Yeah, as Doctor Who fans, we're sad that there's a lot of missing episodes, but in the grand scheme of things, we're pretty lucky. So lucky, in fact, that this serial, The Ark, does exist in its entirety. For some reason, while most of Season 3 was junked, this story never was. Doctor Who history is fun but weird. Anyway, the Ark. The story takes place on a Generation ship, which contains one of the last segments of humanity, millions of years in the future. The humans are travelling to another Earth-like planet called Refusis 2, and it will take around 700 years, so most of the humans have been shrunk and placed in storage, while an elite group, known as the Guardians, take care of the day-to-day runnings of the ship. They're also accompanied by another species, the one-eyed and silent monoids, who work as servants, and the Guardians have vowed to take care of them after their home was lost. The Doctor, Stephen and Dodo arrive, but Dodo has also brought with her the common cold, and with the Guardians and the monoids' future immune system, they start dropping like flies. The trio need to convince the inhabitants of the ship, which Dodo calls the Ark, that they didn't deliberately sabotage their species-saving mission, and they also have to come up with a cure for the viral infection that's decimating its inhabitants. The first thing that leaps out to me for the Ark is just how good looking a story it is. The opening shot shows us this expansive forest set built at Riverside Studios, and it's full of animals. We also get this impressive opening shot of the monoid. Then we get this pan across and the TARDIS fades in, and then Dodo steps out of the TARDIS wearing a medieval squire outfit for some reason, all done in one take. It's these lengthy shots which really gives the story a sense of scope and place, and it helps to sell the illusion of this time machine not only landing in a new place, but that there's people travelling around inside it. There's brilliant camera angles, like this shot from above that communicates the size of this massive indoor jungle that the Guardians look after so that they can populate their new planet with the animals and the plant life from Earth. And wow, there's even stock footage of a baby elephant, and oh cool, that's a really impressive split screen effect by having the Doctor and Stephen at the bottom of the screen, and oh, okay, they're moving across towards it. Oh, that's not a split screen, there's actually a baby elephant in the Doctor Who studios. Insanity. The monoids are pretty impressive creations as well. The actors wearing the suits would have a ping pong ball in their mouth with an eye drawn on it that they'd move around with their tongues. And it's quite an inspired idea, with the large, messy mop-top wigs selling the proportions. Their feet are a bit strange though, and it's clear that they can't move very fast. But it's still impressive having these actors inhabit this space along with the Guardians, and oh look, they even have a little buggy so they can drive around the ship. There's only a couple of sets in this story, including the vast jungle, the large communal space, and also just a couple of side rooms, but it's enough to sell the illusion of the Ark being a functioning society, including how they shrink people. In this case, a crew member is found guilty of carelessness during his work, so he's sentenced to being shrunk and reconstituted at the end of the journey.
I said to the cameraman, shoot on 24 degrees and elevate the camera so the bottom of the frame is his feet, and just pull back. He will shrink. And the camera said, oh, really? And we tried it, and it worked. So I was rather pleased about that.
There's some great directorial flourishes to be found, like this scene transition where a monoid walks into a camera and the resultant blackout transitions to the next scene. I'm curious if director Michael Emerson was taking cues from Douglas Camfield, but either way it's still inventive. The characterization in the opening episode is strong as well, with Dodo impulsively stepping out of the TARDIS and exploring the forest, thinking they must have landed in Whipsnade Zoo.
Dodo, you don't know what you might have found out here. No gravity, poisoned atmosphere, all sorts of things. Look, stop prancing around over there. What happens if you get lost?
I catch a bus back.
A bus? What are you talking about? I mean, just where do you think you are?
Ah, bet you thought you caught me, didn't you? Bet you thought I didn't know. Well, I do.
You do?
Of course I do.
Oh, so this is what everyone talks about. Yeah, so Dodo was introduced at the end of the last serial with a really strong northern accent, but here It's totally changed. She is now speaking BBC English. You see, while the BBC did have bases and made programming outside of London for its first 50 years, there was a definite stigma against regional accents. If you hosted the news, headlined a drama, or did any prominent amount of talking on the BBC, you had to speak in received pronunciation, something that shut out a lot of people from outside of London and also in working class communities. That's why something as simple as Christopher Eccleston in 2005 being able to play the Doctor with his northern accent, that was something almost revolutionary for a Saturday night BBC family drama.
If you are an alien, how come you sound like you're from the north?
Lots of planets have a north.
The plan was for Mancunian Jackie Lane to keep her accent, but after recording The Massacre, the producers wanted her to tone it down for future episodes. The result is that, well, Dodo is canonically a northerner with a southern BBC English accent. It sucks, but that's how TV was. Anyway, there's some fun moments here, as the group try and figure out where they are, and Stephen instantly elects himself as Dodo's babysitter, trying to explain that this isn't a prank and that she's now a passenger on a space-time machine. It feels a bit like we're returning to the Doctor as the parent to the impulsive grandchildren dynamic from earlier stories, and considering the recent amount of death and how long it's been since Stephen hasn't had imminent life or death stakes thrust upon him, it's a nice change of pace.
Oh, you're not going to send me home, are you?
Home? What an idea. I couldn't send you home even if I wanted to.
Oh, that's all right then. I think I'm beginning to enjoy this space travel or whatever it is.
This is just nice to watch. That smile he gives is the first moment of genuine happiness from Stephen in at least 4 months. They're quickly found by the Guardians and the monoids, but Dodo's cold starts spreading through the ship, with the monoids being particularly susceptible. The human commander, played by Eric Elliott, is also taken ill, but he has faith that these strangers mean well. But not every Guardian is convinced, and the trio are put on trial. Stephen starts developing symptoms as well. I'm assuming as an astronaut from centuries in the future, he could also be susceptible to Dodo's cold, just propping up my suspension of disbelief there. So he's put on trial inside a large box with plastic film around it, and he fights for him and his friends' lives.
Guardians, monoids, these beings, whatever they are, place a heavy strain on our credulity.
Well, that's not very difficult. If your medical records are anything to go by, this segment of time, far from being one of the most advanced in knowledge, is one of the worst.
We can cope with all things known to the 57th segment of Earth life, but not with strange diseases brought by you as agents of the intelligences that inhabit refuses.
You still on about that? I've told you before, we know nothing of that planet.
My instinct, every fibre of my being tells me differently.
That, unfortunately, tells me only one thing.
What's that?
That the nature of man, even in this day and age, hasn't altered at all. You still fear the unknown, like everyone else before you.
This is a really good showcase for Stephen. After The Massacre, we know that Peter Purves is a good enough actor to carry Doctor Who, and he continues to do great work. But it's also a good episode for the Doctor and Dodo. Dodo feels a massive amount of guilt for bringing the cold on board the spaceship, and you'd think that maybe a few seasons ago, the Doctor might scorn her for being so careless and for letting this happen, but he actually takes responsibility for this.
Now, don't worry. It's not your fault at all. If it's anybody's, it's mine.
You get this lovely moment during the trial, where the Doctor and Dodo are watching from their prison cell on a monitor. A Guardian enters the courtroom and says that one of the humans has died from the cold, and the camera zooms in on the Doctor and Dodo's hands as they hold onto each other in comfort. A lovely moment that isn't lingered on.
It's all my fault. If I'd known it was going to be like this, I'd never have come.
Oh, and by part 2, Dodo's accent has changed. Again, back to a northerner. And what's worse, the Doctor hates her slang.
Dr. Stephen, get a look at these fab pictures.
My dear child, if you're going to be with us for any length of time, you'll have to do something about that English of yours.
What's wrong with
But
it?
it's terrible, child. Oh, it's most irritating.
She even, unironically, uses the term gear when looking at the plans for the statue that the Guardians are building to commemorate their journey. It will take hundreds of years to build and will celebrate humanity.
It's a substance called gregarian rock. It'll last forever. Here's the finished design.
Hey, that's gear.
Hello, what's this? Gear.
But if this plotline of a plague sweeping through a futuristic civilization and the Doctor needing to cure it as his older male companion develops symptoms, if that sounds familiar to you, that's because it's also the plot of the Sensorites from Season 1. However, it's handled much better here, because it's significantly shorter, but it also has way more nuance to it. The Guardians aren't just irrationally evil like the Sensorite Administrator was, they're understandably afraid. There's a lot riding on this mission to get to their new homeworld, and they even put the group on trial. Yeah, it's a bit of a kangaroo trial, but at least they pretend to give a crap about due process. They ultimately find them guilty, but before the Doctor and his friends can be sentenced, the Commander makes a passionate plea to give them a chance to find a cure.
Wait! This has gone far enough. Zentos, this is your commander speaking. I order you to release the travelers immediately. They will be given every facility for research. They may be our only hope. See to it.
But the hearing decided differently, Commander. These people are dangerous.
Don't argue with me, Zentos. Those are my instructions.
And the Guardians agree. They give the Doctor access to their medical facilities, the monoids assist him, and the Doctor cures the common cold. Also, he's assisted by a Guardian called Ross. Now, Ross is played by Michael Sheard, and while it's a small role, you're going to see this face a whole bunch during the classic series, as Sheard was one of the most prolific guest stars in Doctor Who's history, with 6 different credits spanning 5 different Doctors over 22 years. With the cold cured, the Doctor and his friends bid the Guardians and the monoids goodbye.
Remember, your journey is very important, young man. Therefore, you must travel with understanding as well as hope.
And they get taken back to the TARDIS. Now, that's strange, because the story's over, but it's only been 2 episodes. But okay, makes my job a lot easier. Anyway, the Doctor, Dodo and Stephen leave the Ark, only for the TARDIS to land in exactly the same place? What?
Doctor, Stephen, look!
What is it, my dear? What have you found?
The statue. They finished the statue.
You maniacs! You blew it up! God damn you all to hell!
So it turns out the story is only half done. The trio land on the Ark 700 years in the future, and the monoids have taken over. The statue that was supposed to represent humanity now represents monoid supremacy. The once silent monoids are now equipped with voice boxes and are armed with futuristic cattle prods, which they now use to violently subjugate the Guardians. And fun fact, one of the monoid voices is Roy Skelton, who would go on to voice the Daleks and the Cybermen and much more up until 1999.
It seems that when you were here before, the Guardians of that day didn't believe that you could travel through time as well as space. Why have you come back?
The TARDIS made the decision.
Are you telling me that you can't control your own machine?
So the Doctor and his friends' interference has changed the course of history, or changed the course of the future. One of the strains of Dodo's cold sapped away the morale of the Guardians, and the monoids, not very happy to have become servants on the ship, they rose up and took control. Now, this twist and cliffhanger in part 2 is great, and it's hard to imagine the impact that this must have had in 1966, because how long a particular story would be, that wasn't public knowledge, so audiences did not know going in whether this adventure on the Ark would be a 2-parter or, God forbid, a 12-parter. The issue is that things just get significantly less interesting in the second half of this serial. The monoids in the first 2 parts were this really interesting alien presence who communicated through sign language, an idea put forward by producer John Wiles due to his experience producing theatre for deaf children. But now that they can speak, it's just generic bad guy dialogue, and to be frank, they're pretty shit villains. Now, I'll give them credit for catching on pretty quickly that the Doctor, Stephen and Dodo are time travellers from 700 years ago, so the story does not have to stop dead for a while to work out that logistic. But the majority of the story momentum from the second half of the arc, it comes from the monoids just speaking their evil plans out loud and in the open, and then another character overhearing them. I'm not kidding, this happens about 4 times in these 2 episodes.
A short while after we leave, they will disappear in a cloud of fragmented pieces.
You mean a bomb of some kind?
A fission device. I had it made secretly, and it is ready to be detonated at any time.
But where is it?
The last place they would think of looking. That is, if they even suspect its presence before it goes off.
Why should they? Then that will be the end of all human existence.
And even when they are trying to be coy or trying to withhold information, they buckle under the mildest of scrutiny, like this scene with monoid number 2 and Dodo.
Yes, I bet it'll take some time to get the whole of the population down here, so the sooner you get started, the better, I should think.
Don't worry, it may not take as long as you think.
What do you mean? Are you up to something?
No.
No, but you gave yourself away, didn't you?
Sometimes the funniest way to talk about classic Doctor Who is to just show clips like this. This show is amazing.
Take them away to the security kitchen.
I'm sorry, what? A security kitchen?
Take them away to the security kitchen.
Yes, most of the enslaved humans are put to work in the security kitchen, where meals are prepped and made. We see a bit of cool futuristic tech by having the humans put a pill into a bowl of water and then it becomes a full meal. Yeah, it's a cool effect, but why a security kitchen that the humans are forced to work in unsupervised? Surely there are knives or tenderizers or other instruments that the humans could use in a rebellion. The monoids are just asking for an uprising, especially by poisoning. Now, the second half of the arc does not work for several reasons, like the ones I've just mentioned.
What do you mean? Are you up to something?
No.
But the main one for me is that the first 2 parts didn't really justify this massive heel turn from the monoids. Now in parts 1 and 2, it's clear that the humans are in charge and that the monoids do a lot of menial work. A big reason for this is because the monoids can't communicate through language. It's not a morally good arrangement, I'm not defending it, but it's not like the monoids are being cattle prodded or threatened. Heck, the monoids actually participate in the sentencing done against other humans. When the monoids start dying from the cold, the humans are organising full-blown funerals for them. Now, there's definitely a moral distinction that the Guardians make when a human dies from the cold. It's treated as this massive deal, despite several monoids already dying. It's, like I said, it's not good. But in the second half, the monoid leader explains that the Guardians developed the tech that allowed them to speak.
You mean it was our fault that you took over because of the fever?
In part.
There were other reasons?
The main reason was the Guardians themselves. They were a simple people. They actually encouraged the research from which we developed our voice boxes and heat plots. They were totally unprepared for the conflict when it came.
What happened to them?
Many were killed. The rest are prisoners.
So yeah, the Guardians actually encouraged this research, and the monoids responded by enslaving them in return. There's just a few gaps in the logic here. It's mainly because the monoids so thoroughly commit to being utter scoundrels and villains in the second half of the story, to the extent where they want to kill everyone on the Ark by hiding a bomb in the monoid statue. It's just too big a turn. So the Ark arrives on Refusus 2, which is just another jungle planet that appears empty, but is actually inhabited by the invisible Refusians. Recent solar flares wiped out their physical existence, so they're now a more spiritual, telepathic creature. They don't want a warlike group like the monoids taking over, so the Doctor and the Guardians overthrow the monoids, and they throw the booby-trapped statue out of the Ark so it can safely explode in space. The problem is that the monoids did not really need overthrowing, because the leader's subordinates keep scheming amongst themselves to overthrow their leader, and in the end they mostly wind up killing each other.
What is the meaning of this? We are going back to the Ark.
That is now against my orders.
Your orders. You have given too many and delivered them unwisely. Now they mean nothing to us.
And now we get to the strange race element of all of this. You see, while the monoid's design was built out of practicality, it seems like they've taken some unintentional inspiration from the works of John Mandeville, specifically his book Travels, a mostly fictional collection of travels but sold as actual fact on what societies were like outside of Europe during the Middle Ages, including Africa, how the people there apparently had jet black skin, faces where their chests should be, and massive umbrella-shaped feet. I'm sure it's an unintentional resemblance, but the slavery aspect of the monoids is also morally questionable, because it shows that even when the monoids get supposed retribution over the Guardians, they are so dumb and so incompetent that they can't sustain their own emancipation, and they end up killing themselves. An idea still used today by anti-black advocates for why slavery should not have been abolished. It's just a bit yucky, especially with the Guardians all being depicted as peaceful white creatures being overtaken by dark-skinned aliens who were formerly slaves and are now getting a form of violent revenge for the sins of the past generations. Combine that with the incredibly vague and almost non-existent backstory for the monoids being refugees who the humans took in after their own planet was destroyed, and let's just say that Suella Braverman's favourite Doctor Who story is the Ark, and that's not a good thing. Now, the second half of the Ark has these fun moments that you can laugh at.
Take them away to the security kitchen.
But there's a lot of unintended subtext here, which makes for uncomfortable viewing, which is a shame, because I think a lot of thought has gone into this. New script editor Jerry Davis was a big H.G. Wells fan, but it seems that writer Paul Erickson, he was as well, taking cues from works like The Sleeper Awakes and The Outline of History when conceiving the idea of the generation ship. You've also got War of the Worlds with the Common Cold wiping out the highly advanced race, and The Time Machine with the statue twist. The ending of part 2 of the Ark actually predates the original Planet of the Apes movie by over 2 years, which is insane to me. There's a couple of issues with the visuals, but these are nitpicks considering everything else, like the telekinesis effects in parts 3 and 4, the brilliant model shots like these landings and takeoffs.
It's only a model. Shh.
The casting of actual children on the generation ship as well does a lot to sell the idea of this being, well, a generation ship. There's frequent video communication, which is so understated that it becomes just matter of fact in this far future depiction of humanity. The music is a bit lacking, mainly because of budget reasons. They're just reusing the score from the Daleks, which is a shame, but this is such a great looking story. Part 4 is also notable in Doctor Who history as being the show's first episode to mostly be recorded out of order. You see, Doctor Who, like most shows in the 60s, was recorded almost almost like live theatre, with cameras having to move from position to position and the actors hopping between sets in the studio in real time. Doing cuts and edits was very expensive, and a 20-minute show like Doctor Who was only given about 45 to 50 minutes of film to work with during the filming day. But with Part 4 of the arc, director Michael Emerson had to deal with a large cast and also complicated launcher props, so he recorded the episode in blocks based on sets and also based on cast members, and then it was edited in the proper order after the fact. And you can really feel this. Part 4 has a proper sense of pace and energy to it. It's kind of uncanny, and I like it a lot. Unfortunately, just before the filming of Part 4, Michael Emerson walked into the studio and was handed a note from the producers. He was being fired, and his BBC contract would not be renewed, partly because of his prior sour relationship with head of serials Gerald Savory, but also because of his radical approach to filming Doctor Who out of order. But he got the job done, he did well, and Michael would ultimately have the last laugh, as in a few years' time, all of Doctor Who would be filmed this way. Now, the arc starts really strongly, with great world building, compelling and fun characterization, great literary and scientific inspiration, and it leads to a phenomenal mid-serial twist, but then the weak villains drag the story down with questionable morals and generally just a weak plot that limps to its conclusion, even if the second ending does have some poetic symmetry to it.
Yes, you must travel with understanding as well as hope. You know, I once said that to one of your ancestors a long time ago. However, we must be going. Goodbye.
It would be so funny if the Doctor and his friends got in the TARDIS, only for them to land another 700 years in the future and realise that things are somehow even worse. The story never thinks to address the Doctor's hypocrisy when it comes to meddling with events, which makes this ending fall a little flat. There is some ironic fun to be had here.
What do you mean? Are you up to something?
No.
But the arc just runs out of steam. Those first two parts are pretty special though. I'd never watched this serial before making this review, and I was kinda shocked. I think fandom has been sleeping on this story. It's even a good serial for our main cast, with the Doctor, Stephen, and newcomer Dodo getting chances to shine. But then I watched the ending and I can see why it's often ignored. But still, it looks great, there's terrific direction and production work, and while the arc is a mixed end to the John Wiles era of Doctor Who, if this and the Mythmakers was his ultimate vision for the show, I think it was a worthwhile endeavour to pursue. After Doctor Who, John Wiles continued writing and working as a script consultant for TV shows, and he would work in theatre and on novels for decades after, before he passed away in 1999 after a battle with cancer. While his era for the show was a turbulent time, by the end of production for the arc, things were starting to gain stability. Hartnell and the BBC higher-ups had won the fight for him to stay on the show. Peter Purvis's contract had been renewed for another 12 weeks, though with the understanding that he would be replaced afterwards. And Dodo now rounded out the cast after months of the show having no regular female companion. New producer Innes Lloyd was waiting in the wings to take over, and with script editor Jerry Davis, they started drawing up plans to give the show a full-blown renewal. But we'll talk about that next time, because the arc ends with the cliffhanger ending of the Doctor turning invisible. What is going on? Well, the Doctor and his companions are separated in order to play a series of childish but deadly games, all for the amusement of a cosmic being. Join me next time as we talk about the Celestial Toymaker. I'll see you then. Hey folks, thank you so much for watching this review of Doctor Who The Ark. Now, I'd never watched this story before going into this review. I did the little credits joke where Winnie appeared on my desk and I said, oh, The Ark's your favourite story, and people had been asking, is there like a connection there? Is there a reason? And no, I thought it was just a random thing to say in the moment. Turns out maybe Winnie's favourite story is The Ark, because it's about a group of subservient creatures who decide to overthrow humanity, and now I need to keep an eye on my cats. Don't leave any future futuristic cattle prods lying around. Anyway, if you enjoyed this review, be sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date on all future Hartnell reviews. Also, hit that like button, it really helps me out. Leave any comment down below to appease that almighty YouTube algorithm. This review is quite difficult to put together because my laptop has been having some proper issues over the past few weeks. It keeps on crashing, which makes editing very difficult. I'm currently saving up to upgrade to a proper editing and streaming PC, and you folks can help out with that by becoming a patron. Not only can you help to keep the lights on here and support my work, but also you get a load of perks like your name in the credits like these people here, access to a Mr. TARDIS Discord server, access to these reviews really early, and also here's a shout out to some particular patrons. Adam Grattan, Alex Dry, Ben Langdon, Callum Baird, Chiba City Blues, Dan the Dreamer Shill, Daniel Davis, Darkstar2189, Darren Carver-Bausiger, Dean Jones, Dylan Whitaker, Finley Rude, Ginger Animator, Jack D. Evans, Joseph Adams, Lard Dragon Ezra, Leela, Maria Bergman, Mario Fanboy 15, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Pat Andrews, Randall Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Reese Lloyd, Ross, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whitaker, The Evil Dalek, The Brit Sniper, The Doctor 14 Blu-ray Reviews, Timbo1834, Toby Loxton, and Will. Anyway, the finish line of the marathon is in sight. Next time it's the Celestial Toymaker. See you folks then.